The US is probably the country with the highest concentration of universities per capita in the world. We have more than 6,000 institutions of higher learning, varying from community college level all the way to doctoral.
Welcome to Higher Ed Without Borders, a production of Edu Alliance, a podcast series dedicated to education professionals worldwide. Each episode is a conversation with thought leaders that will enlighten and provide some new thoughts on critical issues facing higher education. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome to Higher Ed Without Borders, and thank you for tuning in. I am Dr. Senthil Nathan in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and with me is my co-host, Dean Hoke in Bloomington, Indiana. Dean, how are you today, and will you introduce our guests?
Well, I'm doing very well, thank you. And we have a very special guest with us today. This is Dr. Tarek Sobh, who is the president of Lawrence Technological University in Southfield, Michigan. They have an enrollment of approximately 3,000 students. Dr. Sobh is a licensed engineer, professional engineer. He assumed the position recently, meaning January of 2022, and joined the university in 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, September 2020, yes, as promised.
Very good.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he had been a longtime faculty member and senior administrator at the University of Bridgeport, if I remember right.
Yes.
And in the fields of engineering. Your bachelor's degree is with honors at Alexandria University, and a master's and a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. So you also put some time in over at the University of Utah as well, I believe, in terms of faculty. So
yes, that was my first academic job at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. Yes.
Well, very good. Well, welcome to the show, and we thank you very much for being here. Senthil?
Tarek, we are seeing an increasing number of foreign-born scholars like yourself leading universities in the United States. What are some unique advantages that you think these scholars bring to their universities in the US, and what are some unique challenges they may face at times?
Thank you for the question. Of course, and I think one of the reasons for the surge of foreign-born scholars who are and have been for a little while starting to assume leadership positions in the US, meaning the last maybe 10 to 20 years, at the levels of chairs and deans and vice presidents, provosts, and as of recent, even presidents, is obviously the influx of great scholars and international students who have been coming to the United States for the last 30 or 40 years to study for graduate degrees and pursue doctorates and get into higher education as a career. So I guess the inevitable outcome of the surge of international students that the US has been very blessed to receive, for the last few decades, is that many of these wonderful scholars and scientists and academicians would progress in their academic career to the levels of, again, chairs, deans, provosts, and presidents and such. And again, from the point of view of unique advantages or positives resulting from this recent trend, is, of course, the global experience and the international, knowledge that these scholars not only bring to their new jobs, but also the experience that they themselves have had as, students in U.S. universities, and also being students, before that, in many cases, in international universities. And I think the inclinations of many of these wonderful emerging leaders who were born outside the U.S. is naturally going to be trying to form things like partnerships and exchange programs and joint research endeavors between the universities that they are currently assuming leadership positions in. And of course, many other wonderful and very accomplished universities all around the world, not only necessarily from the place that they already that they have come from, but also other countries globally and so on. which of course naturally would lead to great joint efforts in doing joint research, which would lead to greater recruitment efforts in bringing even more qualified, excited international students to come to the US to assume, positions like research assistants and teaching assistants and such. And it really helps enrich the globalization aspect of many US universities. The US really is a global hub for internationalization, and the more many of these foreign scholars assume leadership positions, the more the chance and the opportunities that they would be interested in starting in joint research and recruitment activities. And also it's an advantage because it provides for the students in these universities unique opportunities to collaborate with, foreign, university, to collaborate with international students, to travel abroad and be able to peruse the opportunities for studying and doing research in other countries. So it enriches the globalization ecosystems of U.S. institutions in measurable and many immeasurable ways. Of course, the challenges, in terms of the opportunities for assuming leadership is again, it's typically the glass ceiling syndrome. I mean, for many, foreign-based scholars, for many foreign-based professors who started, their academic journey in the U.S. by studying in the U.S. and getting excited about doing research and getting their doctorate degrees and then starting their first, for example, academic professorship in one of the U.S. universities. The numbers are not dramatic in terms of, international foreign-born leaders in many U.S. universities still. It is a pattern that's starting to happen, but the numbers are not very, very significant. So in many cases, you see these young professors or middle career professors who do not see enough role models or enough people at that level of leadership in the universities that they work in. Of course, now living in the US is hopefully starting to disappear, right? As more examples and role models and individuals assume these type of positions, I think you will see that hesitancy go away. So that would be my take on it.
Thank you, Tarek. Dean?
Dr. Tarek, let's talk a little bit about your institution itself. We've spoken to several of the university leaders on this series, and they've expressed their advantages and also their challenges that they have. I believe in our series so far, you may be the first private U.S. university that we have spoken to. And coming from that world at one time, I realize there are unique advantages and disadvantages. I'd like to hear your point of view in terms of your university and how they perceive that.
Of course. Lawrence Technological University is truly a very unique, eminent private institution of higher learning for multiple reasons. And let me talk about that for a little while. I mean, the US is probably the country with the highest concentration of universities per capita in the world. We have more than 6,000 institutions of higher learning, varying from community college level all the way to doctoral, of course. That's a very, very large number of higher education institutions. When you take a look at that landscape, and of course, given my own inclination and training as a technologist at heart, and I'm a roboticist, as you both know by training, of course. Near the end of my journey at my previous institution, I was always aspiring to assume a leadership position at the president or provost level in a technologically focused university. And by that I don't mean a glorified engineering school, but I mean a comprehensive university that offers all the majors, but ensures the students are technologically savvy at the end of their journey in any of these majors. So a place where, the health sciences and the clinical sciences would, teach robotic surgery and would teach, bioinformatics and would teach telemedicine and such, a place where schools of architecture and design would teach 3D printing of houses, augmented realities and such, places where schools of business would be teaching forensic accounting and cybersecurity and data analytics and artificial intelligence applications in business and so on. And when I started doing my scan of these 6,000 institutions, very interestingly, it turns out there's only 56 technologically focused universities, institutions of higher learning in all of the US, less than 1%.
Wow.
It was stunning. And it was stunning to me doing that research after having been in higher education for 30 years. I always thought that number would be around, 300-400, for example, right? So it was kind of very revealing, that in the 21st century, there would be not that much focus, really, institutions within the technological arena. And more interestingly, when I scanned these 56 universities, it turned out that only half of them were comprehensive, meaning they offer all the majors at all the levels, from all the way from associates to PhD and doctoral, and offers all the disciplines. Some of the others are wonderful, eminent institutions, but the studies end at, for example, the bachelor's level, or they don't have the diversity of majors. So that was also very revealing. Less than 0.5%. With 28 institutions that are by mission, vision, and name, technologically focused. And in my own case, I have always worked in private higher education. With my previous employer at the University of Bridgeport. And of course, I worked in industry, both in industry and Phillips Research Labs, and of course, for industry as a consultant for many years. And I only worked in a public university, which was a great experience at the University of Utah for a little less than 4 years. But I always thought that from the point of view of, again, my technological training and being an engineer at heart, I always thought that private universities are much more nimble and agile than public institutions. Things get done faster, and it's easy to make decisions, come up with new eminent interdisciplinary programming quickly, easy to form relationships both with international institutions and companies and other entities and so on. And out of these 28 institutions of higher learning, it turns out there were only 13 institutions that were private. We're talking here now about less than 0.25% of US institutions of higher learning. And some of these names you would know, right? I mean, MIT, right? Caltech, Lawrence Tech, RPI, WPI, Stevens Institute of Technology, as an example, and 6 others, right? Or 7 others. So it was kind of interesting, and again, to see that mix. And of course, obviously, and Lawrence Tech is even unique within these 13 because the intimacy between industry and co-ops and internships with the university, given where we are in the Metro Detroit area, of course, and the exploding, innovative new auto industry of the future and so on, and the suppliers industry and others, we're very, very intimately involved with the industry. Not only do most, if not all of our students actually go through at least one or co-ops or internship before they graduate, but also exhibiting, 100% employment. Actually, my problem in Lawrence Tech is not finding jobs for my students, given the technological and STEM-based education they receive in the different majors. My problem is to keep them till they graduate, because they get the job offer, after the first or second internship, and they want to finish part-time, which I don't encourage, But again, the uniqueness of Lawrence Tech, again, and talking about the advantages of the university, not only being one of this very, very elite core of 13 comprehensive technological private universities in the country, but the outcomes are simply fantastic. I mean, all the students do co-ops and internships more or less guaranteed. Our industry relationships and the projects and the joint research we do with industry is very, very sizable. And undergraduate and graduate student research is prevalent in every major. Our funding, which is significant external research funding, that is not only from the classical sources of U.S. funding for research like the National Science Foundation and the Department of Education, Department of Energy, etc., but actually a very significant portion of our funding comes from companies and industries supporting our research projects, supporting not only research projects, but undergraduate student projects, adjuncts who are very, very industry oriented and work in industry, work hand in hand with our professors and students from day one, And we also are, as you mentioned, we're a little more than 3,000 students, so we are medium size, and we insist on having also smaller class sizes, so we don't have any class in any major, from architecture to design to arts and sciences and engineering and business, more than 25 students. And these are very unique differentiators. So it's a great and truly forward-looking, progressive, technological-based and STEM-oriented university that also emphasizes, and that's what we've been doing for the last few years, emphasizing interdisciplinarity in our education, which is really required to create the professional of the future who would be he or she comfortable, with the changing pace of technology and the fact that most of the emerging fields in the professions are very interdisciplinary based and require a breadth of knowledge in many different areas.
Right. I think you're right about that. Senthil?
Just changing track to you as an individual, Dr. Tarek. The higher you go in higher education, the lonelier it gets. And as a first-time president who took the position less than a year ago, what do you think are some keys to your success as a leader in higher education?
Thank you so much for the question. And I'm not an expert on leadership per se, so all I can contribute is my own experience and my own feelings. Like, of course, many other aspiring leaders in higher education, I did go to the expected and requisite training, right? Whether it's the presidential training, workshops and seminars and programs or others like that. The key is not being afraid to get out of your comfort zone, not being afraid to go and actually spend a week or two and get really involved and understand how admissions processes work internationally and domestically and transfer and so on. Spending a week or two, with the administration and finance people to understand budgets and how the budgets work and the human resources piece of the budget and the costing, of programs across the university and how to manage the debt and the bonds and all of these issues, that relate to that, getting involved in fundraising and donations and what that means and how the funnel, works and engaging potential prospects and providing an inspirational, message to people to help out, future generations of potential students, etc., and even the mundane, building and grounds, and which is very important, and facilities management, etc., and how things get designed and worked and built and maintained, and what that means from a fiscal point of view. And it's a whole set of things, and that has to be done intentionally. It cannot be. It's not something that people absorb while they're walking around. No, they have to invest the time and the energy and truly get educated by the relevant professionals in this area in preparation for such a leadership role in higher education. And in answer to your question, I think that was most helpful to me, trying to understand different parts of the organization for a long time. I mean, I did try as a young professor to understand many of these aspects as I grew, as I evolved in my administrative roles, to chair and dean, etc. I tried to learn more about the non-academic piece in addition to the academic piece. And I think that's the best preparation. Attending workshops, of course, and getting mentored and finding role models to ask questions of, is crucial, incredibly crucial. But nothing is more important than immersing yourself within these operations for significant durations while you're working at the university. One can hear and get trained all the time, but seeing it and doing it and participating and trying to understand and help out in operations out of the mainstream of the academic operations that a typical professor and an academician would be involved in would be the key to assuming the leadership position and gaining the trust of the individuals in the other parts of the university that you have the executive and leadership skills. And of course, the second piece is people. At the end of the day, we can study all we want, we can understand how operations work, but unless, the leader is a humane leader who knows her or his employees, and I mean everybody, faculty and staff and administration, truly cares for them and wants to make all the time absolutely sure that they are well taken care of and appropriately trained and also promote it, right? And really make that an intentional piece of the job, how to professionally develop and help out the professionals working with you, everybody, faculty, staff, administration, unless that piece is intentionally taken care of and managed. It doesn't matter what the manuals say about leadership or management. People are the ones who do the job. Faculty are the ones who develop the products, right? And the actual content. The administration staff are the ones who admit the students and take care of their needs, etc. So someone like me or a dean or a provost can say all we want, about what we want to do or what we think is the right thing to do, but we don't execute them. We provide direction, right? The people who execute them are our staff and faculty and other administrators. So they have to be truly taken care of and in a very humane fashion and be helped to professionally develop, to be leaders in their own right, and to have the confidence and the appropriate working environment to perform reasonably well. And yes, it is lonely at the top, as you mentioned. It is true, at any level, to be very honest, not only the presidential level, but again, a working environment is an environment that in many cases, some decisions have to be made that might not be very popular, right? And might not be, not every decision that will be made is going to be something that everybody claps to and are very happy with. That doesn't happen in any organization in the world. And of course, having, very intimate, relationships or, friendships and so on and so forth within the set of employees who report to any leader could become an issue. That's the reality in life, right? So, I think, maintaining professionalism and again, caring for people significantly and making sure that they do well is the key. But forming incredible, very, very tight, quote unquote personal friendships, when you are at that particular level, is a little bit of a tough proposition. Yeah. Being again a caring and humane leader does not mean that you are everybody's best friend, because you will never be that as a leader of any organization. For that, I have my wife. So, it's not a big. It's a different proposition, So I hope I answered your question. So
yeah, that's a good hint. Actually, the last one you said, I think it never gets lonely if you have your wife. I think you can share everything. Dean?
I'm not so sure about everything, but yes.
Well, we're going to bring her on the show next. And
I had a feeling to say that, Dean. Yeah, please.
Let's talk a little bit we talk about the loneliness, but at the same time, from a career point of view, you've been at this well over 20 years, even longer in terms of the academic career, and you've had a chance to observe and move up. But at the same time, I know my personal experience, and I think with most people, there were others within the university that became mentors, guides. Tell me about a couple of yours. I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
There are definitely more than a couple. I have been blessed all my career with amazing mentors and individuals who truly helped me along the way. And gonna say something a little bit out of context, but here goes. They always talk about two things, right? When it comes to progression in any career, right? Whether it's an academic or industrial careers in general. And people say, well, intellectual capacity, which some people call, let's say, analytical capacity, or organizational thinking, liberally called sometimes as intelligence, right, is very important, right? And some would call it IQ or emotional intelligence, or again, organizational capability, analytic ability. Intellectual prowess in general is important, obviously, right? And some other people say, well, it's how hard you work, right? It doesn't matter. Meaning, or the first piece, what I mentioned as intellectual prowess matters, but what really matters is incredible hard work, right? And with these two things, incredible hard work, persistent, conscientious hard work, and doing and analyzing things appropriately, again, these two are the measure for success. And in my opinion, if these were the only two, as an example, Dean, I would actually put hard work, number one, right? Hard work and persistence. But there is a third one, which I personally feel is more important than these two. And that's finding people to help you along the way. No one can do it alone. No matter how smart a person is, no matter how incredibly hard the person is, if the person, whoever she or he is, do not find people who would help her or him promote them and help them out and believe in them and help them assume leadership positions and so on, none of that matters. So for me, and I truly believe in this, I believe in that. It takes a community. It takes truly a community of people who believe in you, who help you, who are your supervisors in many cases, who would help you and promote you and give you raises and encourage you on. I've been blessed all my life, and I've had so many of these. And without these individuals, nothing would have happened, regardless of the hard work and everything else of that.
I think that's quite true. I think that's true for many of the leaders. Senthil?
Yeah, Dr. Tarek, as a U.S. university leader, you have traveled widely around the world, including our region. And this podcast goes about 50% of the audience, they come from outside the U.S. So over the past decade, as you have traveled around the world, what significant changes, reforms, transformations that you observe in different regions of the world in higher education?
I did have the honor, and I was blessed to have had the opportunity to probably visit more than 90 countries in my career as an academician and a scholar, spanning everywhere, all the continents. Of course, the largest percentage of these, of course, obviously were for work purposes, right? Either, delivering talks, collaborating with colleagues and researchers in other institutions, executing agreements with either universities or companies and such. And again, there is a shift in higher education, a significant change globally, not only in the US. I think in many ways, institutions in all regions of the world, to be very honest, not only necessarily, South America or the Middle East or Europe or Asia, are starting to, how should I delicately say this, eloquently articulated? I think they're waking up to the industry needs and what, companies really want from the graduates that they are producing. And I think that shift is being demonstrated in a renewed or emerging focus on skill sets as opposed to degree names or degrees. So you see an emergence of professional development certifications, things like micro-credentials, in addition to degree programs in many of the countries of the world. You see a very significant shift in the curricula in terms of trying to design curricula that are becoming more and more interdisciplinary, right? You see a shift in making sure that students have the right skills. And by the way, I do not only mean technical, interdisciplinary, technological skills. I mean work skills, right? And they are, of course, these three plus others. Skills like presentation skills, writing skills, working in a team skills, leadership skills, entrepreneurial skills, project management skills, social/ethical skills when it comes to technology, which is an emerging paradigm with things like artificial intelligence and autonomy and so on. Service skills and the importance of serving communities, global skills, right, in the curriculum. So I am seeing a welcome shift, to be very honest, for many universities in many regions of the world to get away from the rigid bean counting curricula design with a very specific degree name as being the only outcome of the education globally in many universities, including Asian and African and Middle Easterns and European and so on, to more of understanding of the need for this global set of skills for graduates of any major, not only one particular major and the other. And I think this is very, very welcome. I also, of course, see, that, and of course that has happened over the 30 years anyway, that the transparency of education, being able to be in Africa or the Middle East and or Europe or the US and have, at your fingertips, access to all of this wide variety of curricula being offered all over the world, right, is opening the eyes of academicians, right? But the bottom line is truly industry, educating for the needs of humanity, as opposed to education for education purposes, right? Education is not really about providing a credential, because in many cases, maybe 20 years or 50 or 100 years from now, the name of a credential is going to be irrelevant. It's the skill set that enables person to progress, right? I mean, even here within the Detroit areas, several of the auto manufacturers are not even requiring degrees anymore, but requiring skill sets in very specific areas, regardless of the degree name or the degree discipline. So primarily, or one of many, but probably the most prevalent ones that come to my mind right now, educating for workforce development, educating for industry needs, educating for the emerging fields of the future, as opposed to the rigid bean counting type curricula design and dispensation or disbursement. So
great. Senthil, we need to wrap this up and finish, and please go ahead.
We'd like to thank our special guest, Dr. Tarek Sobh, President of Lawrence Technological University. This concludes this episode of Higher Education Without Borders. If you would like to comment on today's show and suggest a future guest, please go to www.higherwithoutborders.com, comment section. On behalf of Dean Hoke, Edu Alliance, and Dr. Tarek and myself, thank you, and make sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast app. Thank you.
This has been a production of Edu Alliance, an international higher education consulting firm with offices in Abu Dhabi and Bloomington, Indiana. Nathan and Hoke, along with their team of experienced professionals, have assisted universities worldwide. To learn more about Edu Alliance, go to our website, www.edualliancegroup.com. You will find details on our podcast, contact information, and our services. Thank you.